G'day guys, welcome back to Living with BC. I'm Ben, currently in the middle of moving, which is why we're sitting out here in the corner of the living room because the spare room where I usually do this filming is full of packing boxes, so we're stuck here today. As I'm moving, been on the job hunt looking at ads for positions, predominantly around like management in hospitality. There's a few things that have come up with job descriptions and position expectations and things like that have kind of like, thrown alarm bells and reminded me of some pretty poor times under pretty poor management. So I thought we'd talk about it today. Let's talk management. I guess one of the biggest things for me, and this is all going to be subjective, this is all my opinion. You might have a very different opinion depending on your morals and values and how you've obviously been raised, and then also how you entered the workforce and things like that. But for me, any sort of management position, whether you're running a cafe or you're an officer in the military, leadership is about responsibility. It's not about entitlement. If you're looking at it going, I want to get into a management position so that I have this, this, and this, you're looking at it the wrong way. You need to look at it, and if you're not prepared to embrace responsibility, you don't get the perks that go along with it. It's very much like we all know the scene, well, I know the scene, at the end of Aladdin where Jafar wishes to be made a genie and he's like, sweet, this is going to be awesome, I'm going to have all these powers. And then Aladdin's like, mate, you got to take the bad with the good. Like, yeah, you're going to be super powerful, but you're also going to be a prisoner in a lamp for the rest of eternity, really. And they kind of like get him back in the lamp. They're like, haha, we've won, right? Like that's kind of it. Like if you're looking at it just going like, sweet, I'm going to have all these powers, and you're not looking at taking on any responsibility, don't get into management. There's enough dickheads in the world already. So what do I mean by poor managers? Well, in my experience, poor managers are ones that will complain about their staff and do nothing about it. All right. So I've worked at places where the manager or the assistant manager will complain about a staff member and take no action to try and rectify whatever's going on. Generally, it's to do with a training situation. They'll hire people with no experience and then complain that they have no experience, knowing full well they had no experience when they hired them, and they'll do nothing to train that person. And when questioned about it, you're like, well, why don't you train them then? Why don't you, give them a training shift? Put them on as an extra instead of putting them on as a person with all their full responsibilities. Put them next to someone who can do the job completely by themselves and just have them shadow them. Look, it looks stupid. Everyone feels stupid. The person training them feels stupid. The trainee feels stupid. All the customers feel ridiculous because there's two people doing the job of one person. But what you're doing is investing in that person's time and skill set so that in a day or two, they're going to know enough that they don't need anyone else with them. And they're not going to make mistakes. And that's a really important thing. So if you're not willing to do that, and you're just going to complain that your staff don't know what they're doing without trying to train them properly, you're a poor manager, in my opinion. The employee management relationship is crucial. And a lot of managers don't seem to understand, well, a lot of managers I've worked with at least, don't seem to understand that without their employees, they fail. The amount of times I've overheard managers or supervisors talking as if they're offering some sort of charity. They'll be like, I'm paying you good money. And you're like, yeah. And you're getting a service in exchange for that money. Like, you're not getting nothing out of this transaction. The reason you need to hire staff is A, either like you can't do it all yourself, or B, you don't want to do the work yourself. Both of those are fine, but then don't act as if you're taking your employee off the street and you don't need their help. You're just paying them for the sake of it, because that would, well, firstly, that's not true. That's not what's happening here. And then secondly, that would be really inefficient business practice. You're spending money that you don't need to spend. It's like business 101. Don't spend money you don't need to spend. Big red flag for me is managers that don't roster staff properly. I've worked in places where there's plenty of work to go around, and they just won't take advantage of the staff that want to work and think that they'll call you in at the last minute, and that's a workforce that people want to work at. I'll give you a hint. It's not. I once worked at a place where I was casual and I was rostered off. And so I went to an event with some friends and I got called up while I was there by my boss asking if I could work. He's like, look, we're really busy. I need you to work today. Come in at 4. I'm like, sorry, like I'm at this event. I was scheduled off. Like, I'm not going to leave now. Now, of course, you could look at this and go, well, obviously you didn't really want the hours because you would have taken the job. Sure, I'll give you that. I'll pay that. But then the next day when I worked with the assistant manager, I apologized. I was like, look, really sorry. I was already at an event. Was it really busy? Like, did it just sort of snap in and you get a huge influx of customers and you just needed some extra people? And he goes, no, that's not what happened. He's like, I put in an order 3 or 4 days ago and mentioned to the manager that we're going to get a big order. We should roster on some more people to help us out. And the manager turned around and goes, no, I'll just call them in when I need them. That's a shit manager, in my opinion. Get yourself organised. What a lot of people don't realise is that while casual workers can be great for the employer, they can also be great for the employee. You don't have to take shifts, right? You're not obligated to work a set amount of hours. And that works for the employer because they're like, sweet, I don't have to pay this person 38 or 40 hours or whatever it might be. But the employee also doesn't have to work a set amount of hours. So you call them up last minute and go, hey, can you get here in 20 minutes? They could say yes, but they could also say no. And then you're left in the shit. Whereas if you rostered them accordingly in the first place, you wouldn't be there caught with your hands down your pants. A couple of things I've come across, as I mentioned, going through job descriptions. There was a job going where in the town that I'm moving to where they listed an assistant manager for a restaurant position, and it was basically running the show. Like, this was a job really for effectively it was a full-time job in the office, running the venue, running marketing, running social media, running all functions, overseeing the kitchen and front of house department, as well as operating on the floor. They expected you to operate on the floor between the lunch and dinner service rush hours. All of this was for about 50 grand as an assistant manager. And I'm looking at that going, that's a normal assistant manager salary, but you're doing like 1.5 times the job, or maybe even 2 times the job, depending on how big this establishment is. So what that says to me, other than a whole bunch of red flags, is this is an owner-operator who doesn't want to operate the place, but also doesn't want to hand over the reins to someone else. They still want to maintain a management position so they can breeze in when they want and tell someone, do this or do that because they're the manager / owner, but they actually don't want to be there managing the place. You've just got to pick one or the other. Do you want to be an owner-operator or do you just want to be an owner? Either of those things are fine, but whichever one you choose, you've got to jump in and go for it, and that's it. Another one I recently saw was for a front of house / venue manager for a new dining establishment that's opening up. And they mentioned that they're not going to rattle on all the position expectations and desirable qualifications because if you know, then you know. That threw a whole bunch of red flags up for me. Number one, let's break it down. A venue manager and a front of house manager are 2 different things. Sometimes, depending on the size of the place, they could be wrapped up in one. But generally they're not. And if you want someone to do either of those jobs well, you'll pay 2 separate people to do them, right? You can't pay someone in a decent sized establishment. If we're talking this is a 200 or 300 seat restaurant, you can't pay one person to do the job of 2 people and expect anything less than a half job of either of them, right? So that's my first issue, is that whoever put this ad up is wanting a front of house manager and a venue manager rolled into one. Red flags there. Second point is the way they worded. I mean, this was on a job ad website, and they've put up along the lines of, we're not going to rattle on all the position expectations for this job because if you know, you know. What that screams to me is these guys are a couple of young kids. They might be guys or girls, I don't know. Early 20s is my bet. don't really know too much about hospitality, but have a bit of capital behind them, want to throw it into a dining establishment and be the owners of, a high quality restaurant experience, dining establishment, but don't actually know what they're doing. They're the sort of people that would wear designer suits or designer clothes, and they'll talk down to you even though you've got 15, 20 years experience and they've got 4, just because they're the ones that own the place. And again, if you remember what I said earlier, employee management relationship is vital. Same kind of thing, owner management relationship. If those butt heads and they don't have the same vision, or you've got an owner who's just too arrogant, too cocky, because they think a bit of money behind them makes them better than other people, it's not going to go down well. G'day guys, I just remembered the last little bit on this ad was that this restaurant was only going to be open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sundays, which is fine, whatever. That's kind of cool. You get 3 days off each week. But they reckon that it's midnight close, which to them is not a late close for a restaurant. I mean, midnight's pretty late for a restaurant to shut. I mean, a nightclub, sure, whatever. But for a restaurant, that's a bit odd. Anyway, guys, that was just a little quick video. Like I said, looking at job descriptions and management positions brought up, I guess, some negative feelings of me from past management where things didn't go so well. Obviously, I've had great positive experiences too, and maybe I'm in the minority and I have worked with a more disproportionate percentage of poor managers to good ones. I don't know. If you feel like it, throw a comment in the comment section. Have you had a positive experience or a negative experience, either as a manager yourself or you were an employee? Whatever happened, drop me a line. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. As always, stay cool.